Welcome to Connecting the Dots, a laser focused, quick fire interview on food and the economy with international experts where we seek answers to questions all of us should be asking. I'm Ajay Jakar, Chairman, Bharat Krishik Samaj of Farmers Forum India. Today, we are delighted to welcome Mr. Michael Doane, the Global Managing Director, Food and Freshwater Systems at the Nature Conservancy. Thank you, Michael, for joining us today.
Yeah, great to be with you, Ajay.
You have grown up on a farm and still work on your family farm. How has your upbringing and values shaped your work?
Yeah, I did grow up on a farm, and I consider it to be a real privilege and something that I still hold dear. There was just something that I think helped me understand agriculture and the relationship with nature that I still use every day in my job. And it's always been with me. I come from a family of farmers. My brothers are now still actively managing the farm. I'm a general partner in the farm, and it really keeps me grounded, to the realities of farming, which is very operational. Things don't work the way they should. You often don't think about things as esoteric as carbon markets or the direction of global food security issues or things like that. You're dealing with things that are right in front of you, and most of the time you're dealing with things that break and you have to fix them. And so just the rhythm of being able to think in those terms and put ourselves into the line of issues that farmers and ranchers and fishers are dealing with day by day is, I think, extremely helpful.
I think so. Those insights really help when you're trying to help farmers do better than what they're doing. While most of your funds come from ordinary citizens, last year Bezos Earth Fund gave a $100 million gift to TNC in support of organizations' work. Tell us, how are you going to use these funds? I think lots of people would want to know how you're going to be using these funds.
Yeah, it was an extraordinary moment for a number of organizations that were benefiting from the enormous generosity of the Bezos Earth Fund and the vision for impact that's embedded in these gifts. The Nature Conservancy for now a few years has been building up the science on what we call natural climate solutions. Back when Paris really kind of set the ambition to nationally determined commitments and getting on the 1.5 degree path, it really showed that we're out of step with the big challenge of decarbonizing the economy in such a short period of time. What our scientists showed shortly thereafter was that between then and 2030, some of the low cost but highly effective climate mitigation solutions can be found in nature. Forests, forest management, agriculture, coastal wetlands. We showed that up to a third of the reductions necessary to achieve that 1.5 degree reality by 2050, the near-term emission reductions through 2030 could be found most cost effectively in those areas. So that fundamental science really shaped the proposal we had with the Bezos Earth Fund. And so one of the things that we're doing is really taking that science down to the next level around investable pathways. So a playbook, if you will, of investable deals that governments and companies could start to invest in to operationalize that across all those pathways. Then we also focused on two very unique and important landscapes that hold rich opportunity for actually implementing this work. One is in North America in what's called the Emerald Edge. It's the largest coastal temperate rainforest in the world, about 100 million acres in size, managed in large part by First Nation states. And so really working to help them protect and enhance their carbon stocks and build an economy around that. The second area, Ajay, is in an area that you know, which is in Northwest India, and one of the most important areas for food production in the world, an area that's been heavily developed around rice, paddy rice, and wheat rotations, but has, over time, developed management practices that contribute to climate emissions, namely in the form of burning stubble to enable the double cropping system. So we're working with partners to accelerate the adoption of various management practices that could avoid that burning, and actually in so doing, start to kind of restore the soils and the hydrology, and hopefully find a more productive, more equitable way to produce food in that part of the world. And so these are big projects, they're ambitious, they're risky. And so the capital that the Bezos Earth Fund has devoted to this, I think, is really leadership. And we look to expand that and work with many partners to try to expand the learnings. And I think there will be follow-on activities from this.
That's really great to hear. And we as a farmers organization are really, will be there to support you on your work in India when you're working here. So thank you so much for focusing on Northwest India to help us solve our crisis here. You recently released the new report, Foodscapes, towards food systems transition. Could you just tell us something about it? The viewers would want to know something about it because this is also path-breaking.
There's been growing attention, and rightly so, on the influence of food systems on all of these outcomes, whether it's climate, biodiversity, freshwater, livelihoods, the list goes on. Food production is massive around the world. It's the largest use of our land resources. It's about 70% or more of our freshwater use. It's a big part and a growing part of the global climate emission footprint. And yet, on the other hand, Ajay, as you well know, we now are starting to see how management practices, innovation can make a difference to shift agriculture from being kind of feeling like it's part of the problem to being part of a solution, being part of a regenerative food system. And making that shift is not easy. It's not business as usual. It involves really understanding food production in a very local sense. So understanding that there's great variation around the world in the methods and the incentives and the market structures and the technology to carry out food production. So in Foodscapes, what we did was really build on a lot of the global analysis that's looking at these issues and mapped out in very distinct, unique ways in what we consider to be kind of food-dominated landscapes, what those pathways could look like. And what we showed was that there is great variation, but there's also great potential. And yet we need to be working with local partners, understanding local culture, understanding local policy, and working at that level of the nuance to really calibrate these solutions. And the Nature Conservancy, we're not a food production, we're not at large in food production. We're a small NGO that we're a small part of the food production system when you think about the context of an NGO. We're a large organization, but the food production system, for it to shift, this is going to be a big change. And so we're really looking at those changes at the level that we think they can be executed and putting attention there. And so we've highlighted several cases in this work that is examples of what we think that change could look like. And we want to invite partners into this work because really Foodscapes, in our way of thinking, can be living laboratories to kind of show how that change can occur over the next decade. And to me, it's exactly the kind of work we should be doing and doing with a lot of partners and really seeing it as a way to learn how to make this shift to a regenerative food system.
I think that's really what's needed, to show things change on the ground and with others can follow and others can take lead from. We've just ended with the COP26. Are you optimistic about the climate action? Food systems accounts for 35% of greenhouse gases, but it was not given as much importance as at least I would have hoped it would have received at the COP26. What could we do? What could the world do to make world leaders do more meaningful work at COP27?
Well, I think there's been a lot of work done, as you know, Ajay, to build up the understanding of just how influential food systems and the direction of food systems can be in terms of both mitigation and adaptation on the climate agenda. So I think we've done a lot of work, a lot of really good work to build up the case for investment, for change, for bolder action. Yet, this is a politically sensitive part of almost every economy. Food production is a vital national interest. It's got culture, so it's sensitive. It's a sensitive sector of every nation's economy. And so when we start those discussions, I think we should understand that it's going to be a challenge to really think about making changes that have such implications across an economy, for livelihoods, for culture, and on and on. Yet, I think the kind of work we just talked about is what it takes to show a path, to show the inspiration that we can have a very productive food system, and it can also be contributory to the mitigation pathways or the adaptation pathways we need to invest in. So we totally understand, and that's why we as the Nature Conservancy have really tried to emphasize that yes, we need technology and innovation and policy decarbonizing the economy writ large, but nature holds some special keys. And we need to really increase the level of visibility and investment in these nationally determined commitments that really focus on agriculture and food systems. So I don't have an easy answer for you, Ajay, on this, but I want people to know at COP27, we're already thinking about how to do exactly what you asked us to, you asked in your question, which is how do we raise the profile and get results and get investment in these NDCs coming out of COP27.
That's encouraging. You are a row crop farmer.
Yes.
Monoculture is responsible for biodiversity loss, a large amount of it.
Yeah.
Is there a future away from monoculture, or is it just wishful thinking? For example, can the world decide not to subsidize monoculture cropping? Simply, can we just do that?
Well, that's a good question. And I think, the pragmatist in me, Ajay, suggests that it won't happen easily or quickly to change any of the subsidy schemes around some of the big row crop agriculture production systems. The reason is just exactly why I mentioned, because it's a sensitive part of the economy. It goes to the base kind of interventions on food and nutrition security. So I think that most of the policies supporting row cropping agriculture that we see today will likely continue. But I think there's also ways to make changes to those subsidy flows that start to introduce ideas that can make row crop agriculture more conducive with the ideas we have for regenerative agriculture. Just give you a short example. Corn is a very large crop in the United States. By my latest estimate, the US produces something like 40% of the world's corn and produces 60% of the world's exportable supply of corn, and does it with about 20% of the area that's under production for corn. So it's a very efficient, very globally relevant corn production system with lots of market influences suggesting that will continue. And these are areas that once were basically tall grass prairie in the United States. They were converted many years ago to row crop agriculture. They're not going back to tall grass prairie, but the principles of the prairie, the diversity of the prairie, the succession of grasslands and how they operate, some of those same principles we can bring back into that cornfield. Things like continuous living covers or putting cover crops on the shoulders of the corn production season so that we're getting a lot of the benefits of diverse plant and more continuous plant cover while we're still having a productive cornfield. So those ideas, I think, I do have a lot of hope for that. And I do think policy can support that. So it may not be it might not be the blunt change that we have in mind. It might be something more subtle, like I just mentioned.
I think so. Yes, that's the way we will progress. Thank you so much, Michael, for this interview. It's really interesting to hear the points you have just elaborated on, and we look forward to working with you when you start work in India. Thank you so much, and best of luck for the work you're doing. Thank you so much.